My 9-year-old son asked me if I still loved his dad. That's when I knew it was time to face the truth about my marriage and the shame that came with it. Let me take you back to an evening 20 years ago. I'm in my kitchen. I'm making some dinner. I think I was making pancakes. Everybody wanted pancakes that night. My 9-year-old son, he was doing his homework, at the kitchen counter, and he looked up with his big blue eyes, and he asked me this: "You and Daddy don't love each other anymore?" I froze, literally mid-flip of the pancake. Life was in slow motion. This was not in the parenting manual. You know that manual you think you'll get after your children are born, but it never arrives, and instead life becomes one long improv show? Well, this wasn't a scene I'd prepared for. His question hit me hard. I wanted to reassure him that everything would be okay, but I didn't know. I was uncertain. The truth was our marriage was unraveling, and we were heading for divorce. But it wasn't just the pain of separating from my husband. It was the fear of judgment, of becoming that woman who couldn't make it work. And that's when I realized I wasn't just afraid of divorce, I was ashamed of it. I spent years in this space of pretending everything was fine. Like when you wear pants that are just a little too tight, but you're not ready to admit they don't fit anymore. That was my marriage. It was a little tight, a little suffocating, but familiar. It was comfortable in its discomfort. And you just tell yourself, well, this is just what marriage is, right? Ups and downs, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, in the good times and the bad times. But deep down, I wanted more. I needed more. The woman who got married, at that time, it was 8 years ago, wasn't the same person that she was now. But letting go of that old identity, that was like trying to walk away from a buffet when you know you've already eaten too much, but the dessert tray just rolls itself out. I was stuck, afraid to move forward, because that meant facing an unknown future. But here's the thing about discomfort. It nags at you until you can't ignore it anymore. I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to stop pretending. I wanted to stop pretending that everything was okay with a relationship that was draining the life out of me. I wanted to be free of the shame that was suffocating me more than the marriage itself. But I had no idea where to start. Because let's be real, divorce? That's not just an event. It's a scandal in some circles. You get whispers from neighbors, side eye from friends, and awkward questions from relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. And the stigma? Oh, the stigma is real. It clings to you like glitter after a kid's arts and crafts project. You can't shake it off, no matter how hard you try. So there I was, facing the reality of divorce. It felt like walking into an alternate dimension where everything was upside down. Friends who once invited me to dinner stopped calling. People acted like I was contagious, as if their marriage might catch the divorce. If they spent too much time with me, then it might inspire or instigate divorce with their partner. At least that's what I thought at the time. I do think about it a bit differently now. My sons, they cried themselves to sleep some nights, asking me if things would ever be the same again. I found myself Googling ridiculous things in the middle of the night. Will I ruin my kids' lives? All kinds of things I Googled. And the internet, by the way, is not comforting at 2 a.m. I was suddenly single in a world that still valued the perfect family. I was the first person to get divorced in my family and in my whole friend group. I was trying to figure out how to co-parent with the boy's dad while I was battling the sinking feeling that I was now less than because I couldn't make it work. And in that unfamiliar situation, the shame was loud. Shame does weird things. It makes you feel like you're carrying an invisible sign that says failure in giant neon letters. I had to learn how to adapt to this new world where my self-worth was constantly under attack by my own thoughts. And I hadn't done the work to understand how my thoughts create my reality. So I was constantly in my own head and in my own thoughts. And I didn't feel very good about myself. There were days when I couldn't get off the couch. Days when I questioned if I was making the right decision at all. I literally second guessed every choice that I made. I was struggling not just with the logistics of divorce, but the emotional weight of it all was unbelievable. The comments from well-meaning friends and family, there were so many opinions and so many different ideas from people that love me, but their opinions and what they said was so misguided. I heard, "Oh, you'll find someone else." Or, "Oh, you tried your best." That didn't help. I mean, you tried your best? That's what you say to someone who attempts to make a souffle and it doesn't work out. Not someone whose marriage to the love of their life for the past 10 years has just ended. But here's the thing. In the midst of all that chaos, I started to ask myself, why am I letting this shame define me? Like, why do I care so much about what other people think and say? Why am I living my life based on what other people are thinking and saying to me? I realized I wasn't ashamed of the divorce itself. I was ashamed of what society had told me divorce meant. Like somehow it erased all of the good years I had with the boy's dad. Like it made me unworthy of love or happiness or even simple respect. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was I was brave enough to walk away from something that no longer served me. And that didn't mean I was a failure. It made me a human being. I didn't need to find another person to complete me. I just needed to find myself again. But finding myself again, that wasn't without its sacrifices. That took effort. Letting go of the life I'd built, all the hopes and the dreams, the good and the bad, that was painful. I had to say goodbye to the version of myself who thought that staying in this marriage, no matter what, was best for me and my family and was my ultimate goal. I had to grieve the loss of the future that I once pictured with my boys and their dad and me and trips and family and his parents and all the grandmas and I had built all this up in my mind as being the way to have a family, the only way to have a family. I sacrificed my comfort zone. I sacrificed relationships with people who didn't support my growth. I had to give up the idea that I was going to be the perfect wife or the perfect mom or the perfect anything. That was hard, like real hard, but it was necessary. So here I am now, 20 years later, back in my kitchen, flipping pancakes again, but this time things are different. Some of my boys have moved out, some of them are still at home. They still ask difficult questions, but now instead of feeling frozen with fear, I feel lighter, and we have conversation, and we create. It's not because everything's perfect, but because I've made peace with the fact that it doesn't have to be. I've returned to a familiar place, being a mom, being a woman who's just trying to figure things out, but with a new perspective. I love my work, I love my family, I love my friends. I'm not the same person I was before I got divorced. That's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's freeing. I've learned, I've grown as a person because of my divorce. I used to think divorce was the end of something, like the credits would roll and I'd just fade to black. But it's not. Divorce is just a chapter in your story. And sometimes the most powerful part of any story is when the character steps into their own power, no longer defined by the past, but in the present and in their future. So if you're sitting there feeling as ashamed as I was feeling like you have failed, let me tell you something. You haven't. You are surviving something incredibly difficult. And that's not something to hide from. It's something to be proud of. Remember this, you can divorce without shame. You can rebuild and you can create a life that feels more like you than it ever did before. Pancakes and all.